Hello, welcome to the latest video on tarot, and this one I've been saving for some time. It's a Jean Noblet, not really a review, but some of the notions that have come about once I bought this deck. Now, I bought the deck about 3 or 4 months ago, and rather than do an excited unboxing, which you can see from other people on YouTube, I wanted to give it a bit more time for me to connect with the deck and get to know it. Partly because although I had several Tarot de Marseille decks and I've grown to like them, I was a bit unsure about the Jean Noblet, despite the fact that many very experienced and long-time collectors of decks speak very highly of this, and it's very highly regarded. I wasn't sure at first, and I thought it was down to me. I thought there's something I'm not seeing here, and then quite suddenly it clicked with me, and I could understand why this deck is so highly regarded. So I took the plunge and I ordered it from France, from the estate of Jean-Claude Flanois, who died a few years ago, but his wife now runs the business. And I thought, I'll just get used to these cards. I'll just keep reading them and looking at them and seeing how it affects me. And I thought, I'll just wait. And I feel now is the time. I feel that I kind of, well, I wouldn't say I completely get it, because we're all on, I hate to say it, it's a cliche, but we're all on a journey with tarot, and we are continually learning and revising and delving deeper and finding new meaning in each deck. And it's true of this one. Even yesterday I was looking through the deck and finding things I hadn't seen before, which is the beauty of I think especially of Tarot de Marseille, is that it reveals its secrets much more slowly and much deeper than the modern esoteric decks, in my opinion. So I'm not saying that this is the final word, or I know all there is to know about this. So it's far, far from it. I'm learning all the time. This video is about where I am with this deck at present. I'll try and put a link up to David's Tarot Quest website, which is in French and English, because he's much more knowledgeable on this deck, and he goes into more detail with things that I may get wrong. It may be incorrect, and you can just verify it on his website and ask him questions about it, because he will know much more than I do at the moment. So very briefly, my understanding is that up until last year, this was considered the oldest Tarot de Marseille deck, or nearly complete deck in existence. There has been recently a slightly older deck went to auction, I think in Paris, and it's now in a private collection, but I haven't seen the cards, and I think it is quite hard to find the cards. I'm not sure how they differ to this one. As some of you know, it's considered a Type 1 deck, although it has some slight differences to a classic Type 1 deck in a way. Some have even suggested it's a Type 0 deck that predates the Type 1 and Type 2. I'm not sure about that, and I think I know David has an opinion on this as well, that it's probably not the case, because we don't have an original Tarot de Marseille or the real Tarot de Marseille to look at and compare with. It's a bit of speculation. It's a bit of a guess, really. But one thing we do know from the limited evidence we have is that tarot started as a game, a playing card game, and the 22 atouts, trumps, were added to a playing card deck. But we have to ask why those particular images were added to the playing cards, and why the symbols that are in these 22 trumps have lasted for, well, 4 centuries or so, until the modern era with esoteric decks. Now, there's various theories put forward, and people, naturally, it's human nature to make connections and see patterns in things, and perhaps over-intellectualize and complicate tarot. So, for instance, in the box, we have a little guide book, and it's a nice book, actually. This format I find quite easy to read. Goes into really about the fool's journey and about self-knowledge, and a little bit about the symbolism. It doesn't go too far, but not much on the Minor Pips card. So, you know, one of the things there is about the fool's journey. We also have people that make or have strived to make connections with Kabbalah and astrology and numerology. And although there clearly are elements of that in tarot and Christian iconography and pagan and classical, it's not a complete system. And I think the struggle to make it conform to these ideas has, well, it's been interesting. And really, you can follow all these notions if you want to go down that line. And it makes sense, it has a logic, but it's not getting back to the original tarot. I think you can just take the cards as they are. You can speculate as to why these symbols have lasted, and I'd suggest it's because they're so powerful and universal. But to latch on other notions of secret societies and a guild that has passed on this craftsman's knowledge and hidden meaning, I don't really follow that. In fact, it's interesting because Yoav Ben Dov's book, I've had this a while actually, and I keep going back to it because the more I read it, the more I agree with him. And he has a lot to say about this, about the notion of secret knowledge passed on. I'll read a little bit actually. It says about an unwritten tradition that tarot makers were a sort of conspiratorial guild manipulating European card players into spreading the ancient message without being aware of its real significance. Well, that is plausible, but as he said, it's problematic. And as he said, it's difficult to explain how such a secret could have been preserved through centuries of wars and social upheavals without ever being revealed. It is also unclear why, after 4 centuries of continuous transmission, the ancient traditions suddenly vanished without a trace, just as interest in the significance of tarot cards became widespread. And he says, what if there was no such secret tradition? If we accept this possibility, then it must have been something in the images themselves that influenced people's minds for centuries, motivating them to preserve this ancient set of symbols. I tend to agree with that. I think we take the cards as they are, and it leads on to something that I want to get across in this video, is to encourage people to look at the cards, not look at a book or a little white book about meanings of cards, but to look at the cards yourselves, at the symbols and at the designs, rather than learning meanings. I think ultimately, especially with the esoteric cards in the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition and the Thoth tradition to that extent, this look for meanings to me is quite reductive, because you can go further than that, and I think you can go further if you really look at the cards, and that's what this video is about, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, the power of the cards I think is intrinsic. It doesn't need Kabbalah, numerology, or these other systems latched onto it. It works within itself. You can use those things and it can help. I don't deny that, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary, because ultimately they're also, some of the symbols, they're quite subversive, and at the time that they were produced, they were considered slightly dangerous to the establishment and the church. And it's a wonder that they survived. These bits of card and paper, used extensively, would deteriorate over time. The wood blocks they came from would last a bit longer, but do become damaged. And so this one dates from around 1650, so it's been around a long time. It kind of definitely predates the period when tarot cards were used for divination. So we kind of can speculate of what was the purpose of these trumps. And I still think the game theory is the main one. But, you know, certain symbols were used for these trumps, which are better than alternatives which they could have used. So a little bit then about the difference between the Jean Noblet deck and the standard deck. So here is, this is the Madinier deck. So you can see the difference in size. This one, of course, is a facsimile. It's been slightly improved by Yves Renaud in Marseille. We've done a very good job. It's a lovely deck. Very, very accomplished line work. Let's use this pointer here. The faces are extremely well drawn, and it's been well preserved, and some nice shading as well. It's an excellent, beautiful deck. Now, the Noblet is based on, I think, only one surviving deck. Maybe a second one was referred to, I think, in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. And this one is a restored deck, so it's been cleaned up. It makes it a bit clearer and easier to read, really. And it's a very good restoration. He's kept most of the colours, or improved them, or restored them back to how they would have done at the time. The actual cardstock colour, as you can see here, sometimes on camera it changes things. It's kind of creamy colour. I think we'd actually call it écru. And historically, this is an accurate colour because a lot of the paper and card was made from cotton and linen rags and unbleached. And its natural colour would be this écru, which is both... It's both a warm and a cool colour. It's an ideal background colour. It also means that you don't need to put flesh tones on faces. You just use their background colour. Now, in some restorations today, modern paper technology means that card is very white, it's very contrasty, it pops at you, and it has a completely different effect. And to slightly soften it and make it a bit mellower, they add a flesh tone to faces so they don't look quite so stark and sterile. And this isn't necessary here because that is a reproduction of the natural colour of cardstock in the 17th century. So this also comes with its challenges because unlike the Madinier, which is the oldest Type 2 deck, it is also old, this one's much older, you're on smaller cardstock, and that presents quite a challenge to the master carvers. Now, I come at tarot from an artist's background because that's what I also do, and that includes painting and lino cut. So I've got one of my lino cuts here, and I've just brought this out just to demonstrate the difficulty. I'll try and put a photograph of what this print looks like when I made it. But this is the kind of tool that I use. It would be quite similar. They would be using soft fruit woods, and carving wood is actually even more difficult than lino. You've got to be extremely careful, and they're probably quite a high failure rate because wood has a grain and it has to be as knot free and grain free as possible, which soft woods are. But sometimes the knife can slip. It's incredibly fiddly. And this is how these are produced. So the black lines are the bits that are left, and the spaces are the bits that are carved out. And so when you put your paper on and the ink on, or in this case stencils actually, you've got to be able to leave the finest detail. Now something like an eye, I can't imagine the difficulty of carving that. It's hard enough on here. To do this on a wood block, which is even harder, at this scale, and retain things like circles and eyes and facial expressions is on another level of skill that I don't possess. I'm just astonished at the skill involved in this, because obviously they're not printed in the modern sense. They're not drawn. Oh, they would have been sketched out, obviously, but as planned out in various sketches before actually carving. But still, the final carving is done by hand and has to be correct and very detailed. And one of the features of Tarot de Marseille compared to modern tarot decks is they do seem quite crude and primitive because the technology was. The finer detailed ones were created in places like Italy, in Milan, and we've got the Visconti Sforza decks, which were commissioned by very wealthy aristocrats and were often hand-drawn and painted. And it's a different level of detail that can be accomplished with that. Whereas these were done en masse, probably for, I would suggest for the so-called middle classes of France and Europe at that time. Bear with me. I've had interruptions here, people coming to the door and things. And I did lose a little bit of the middle of the video, so I'm re-recording this bit and trying to remember what I said before of this section and put them together. So I will have to do a bit more editing. The bottom line is I probably need to do this through the laptop or with a better phone, because I keep having some issues, but we'll persevere. And okay, it's a bit amateurish, but hopefully you get the point. So try and remember what I said before, because I've had a gap here. I did miss a few of these major cards, because that was the point, was to start introducing and talking about the actual images of the cards, and encouraging people to look closely. Some thoughts about this, which I do remember, there's these colour choices. I was saying earlier that the CBD deck, my two main problems with that are, one, the facial expressions, and I've said this before, and secondly, and actually more seriously, is the choice of green shade used in that deck. I just find, I think as an artist, I just find it quite disturbing, and I can't look at the deck because the green annoys me, actually. It's just really quite artificial and weird. But Flournoy, in his restoration, I think his choice of colours are excellent. I don't have any problem with these. But one thing I was saying was about this, the blue, the light blue. I mean, light blue has its symbolic meaning in tarot. But I think there's three reasons for this. One is the symbolism, the colour symbolism, which is undeniable that, people were very aware of that. Even the great masters like Rembrandt would have been aware of colour symbolism. Whether he used it in his paintings is open to debate, but he would have. But the creators of playing cards and religious iconography are definitely aware of colour symbolism. So light blue has its symbolic representation. But it also, I think it has practical reasons. One, it may be the thing is that shade of blue, or it could be the nearest approximation to the colour they wanted. And I think often in Tarot de Marseille, pale blue or blue, in more modern ones where the colour palette was reduced, actually represents grey hair. And I'll show you, there's examples of this. And it can also be the landscape. Now, as an artist, if you want to represent depth in a landscape, the distance is often recedes to the blue end of the spectrum to give you that impression. So mountains and hills will often be a pale blue. And I think this is an example of that. This pale blue is distant mountains. But anyway, Judgment. This is a lovely card. And I think this is part of his humour. Her face, the look she's giving him is just, I think that's wonderful. I don't know if that's deliberate, but I just find that very funny. And I just really like it. It's a nice Judgment card. The Lovers, again, this is a lovely card. Her face, her expression, the way she looks at him. Bearing in mind the scale this has been carved on, to achieve that is amazing. It's so expressive. Notice also that he almost seems to float above the ground. They're firmly planted and you don't actually see their feet, but he's kind of raised, almost like he's being lifted. Are they trying to restrain him, stop him floating up to heaven or something? Cupid is so dynamic, so expressive. With a few lines, that's a wonderful achievement. And this cloud is shaped a bit like a bow to emphasize his bow. That's a great card. The Hangman has got the type 1 hands. Somebody said these may be epaulettes. I don't believe that. I think they are hands. I don't quite get it, to be honest. The red tongue. It's accepted by most, it seems, that this is his tongue sticking out. I've seen the original of this, and a comment by a very esteemed writer on tarot who believes this is a printing error, that it was actually a red blob of ink that landed there and has then since been interpreted as his tongue sticking out. And you know what? I tend to agree with that. I'm not sure that is the behaviour or accepted then. I've never seen it anywhere else in any other ancient image. That's not to say it isn't the case. It could be. I don't know. But my feeling is that it's an original printing error that became an established image over the years. Anyway, we could argue about that forever, couldn't we? Le Battleur. Notice we've got two L's. Should that be an E, which was incomplete? I think possibly, actually. He shows the numbers on the dice. Some people would probably make up some meaning about the numbers, or it could be purely random. Now, I would tend to go with apply Occam's razor to a lot of tarot imagery, and that the simplest and the most obvious solution or interpretation is the one we should go with. So I think they're just dice, personally. But this is also one of those images that won me over to this deck. I just think that the Battleur's face is brilliant. That's so expressive. I love his hairstyle. I won't say this on YouTube because I'll get censored, but you can speculate about that as well. I think it's what it is. I think it's exactly deliberate. La Lune, type 1 face. These canines, I know some say a dog and a wolf. I don't see that myself. I think I just call them canines. They're some dog-like animal. They have these red tongues, which are very similar to the droplets being sucked up to the moon. I think this is water. I think this represents water. Again, some people might count the droplets and the rays and make some numerological significance with that. I don't go with that. I think it's an artistic choice. The carve decided that that's the optimum number of droplets we need in that space, and that looks, we don't want fewer or more because it looked crowded. I think it's an artistic choice, but you know, each to their own on that. And Le Soleil, I like this one. It's a good face. I'm always curious about these like Lego bricks, but I'm curious about this pond, this puddle of water that they're standing in, why that's there in this deck, and why he's dressed or partly dressed. That's a very odd choice. Is that just didn't get round to stenciling it? But she, presumably it's a she is naked. but they're supporting each other. That's interesting. Just a quick thing to say about nudity in the tarot. There are quite a few naked figures, and we have to be careful not to put our modern sensibilities on this, because I think in the 17th century and before, because they probably refer to an earlier time, it's simply about purity and wealth and status. And, being naked is kind of about being pure, but it also may represent that you literally don't have the money to dress well, and it shows your social position. So yeah, we tend to look at it in a different way today, but I think that would be more likely the way ancient people would see it, about social status and pure states of being. And then the Hermit, and I think this is where I cut, because I think it then resumed from this point. Okay, sorry about the botching with the editing and things. I need to get this sorted, but I hope we haven't lost too much there. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, I had another camera problem, so I just paused, so hopefully it sort this out. Another great card, the Hermit. L'Ermite. No H. I love his hairstyle. He looks very dignified. A wonderful card. People get a bit obsessed about spelling, but we have to remember 1650. I'm not sure that written French spellings had been standardized then. It was largely an oral language, and there were variations. So we can just accept the spellings can be slightly different in different decks, I think. So La Maison Dieu, the House of God, which is a much better title than the Tower, I think. I particularly like this card as well. Again, people counted these droplets and said, oh, 22. I don't know if there is 22, but that's what people have said. And again, it's the Hebrew letters of the alphabet. Well, why not make it the books of the Book of the chapters of the Book of Revelation that are also 22? Is equally valid. Again, I think it was just an artistic choice of spacing out correctly. But some features here, these men have very large noses, unusually large noses, and I think that is deliberate. I think that one is. I don't think that's because he could carve faces so well and with such detail if necessary. So why not here? I think these large noses are deliberate, and it seems to be this. I would say that's water, possibly. I've seen water in the background on a House of God before, but this one's in the foreground. And also the other features, the figures are out of scale with this tower. They're very, very large. They don't belong in that tower. They're too big for it. Now, again, that could be an artistic choice just to emphasize the figures, but they're definitely not to scale, which is fine. I also like the fact that the flames come from the top of the tower rather than come from the sun hitting the tower. I prefer that interpretation personally, and I won't go into that. Again, there's reasons for that, but I think it's a more valid interpretation for the House of God, or God's house. The Chariot, again, some slight differences. I sometimes think the Chariot card is actually two cards. I wonder if, well, they do connect. Obviously, he's a charioteer driving a chariot, but it's almost like it's completely separate in some ways and attached artificially rather than realistically, because I'm sure he could have, or the image could have been created to make it all one, but they've made it a little bit ambiguous. The horses here, they're different colours, but they're looking in the same direction. And there's the mark of the printer, Jean Noblet. Now here, the death card, La Mort, is named. I think it's the only Tarot de Marseille that does name La Mort, all one word. And this is also one of those cards that really won me over to this deck, because I think it's a marvellous death card. I think his face is fantastic. I find it actually quite disturbing and sort of random, and the randomness and maybe cruelty of death. And I think this one sums it up. It's not quite a skeleton. He's skeletal, but it's not a full skeleton. It's like you can see some of his bones and sinews, but there's no gaps. It's kind of between death and life. And I just think that is quite magical. And I actually think I prefer death scything in this direction. It's traditionally in the past. He's sweeping up the stuff of the past and clearing it out. And is he actually killing people? I suggest not. These are already decapitated. The heads don't seem that distressed. They're looking to the future in that direction. He's just kind of cleaning it up, sweeping it up. It's a wonderfully ambiguous card, and I really like that one. The star card, well, we're used to very beautiful, pretty girls in star cards, and here we've got a slightly androgynous figure with a big muscular back, no bird, blonde hair, pouring onto land and water. So traditional. We've got this weird colour thing going on here where it probably should be blue, but it isn't, and that may be deliberate, but it adds to the randomness of Trump imagery. And again, a great face. Man or woman, who knows? Also this star belly button navel here, interesting. Complements the stars above. Le Diable. This is one of those cards which may not have been carved by Jean Noblet or the master carver. The faces are not quite as well defined, but I think they're great, and I like it for that. I like the fact that they just don't look real. They're almost, this looks like a mask. This is very, I presume it's a female looking at genitalia and breasts, but odd looking. This one, a definite breast there, but what's this? I'm not sure. A lot of questions to ask on this one. Very good. La Papesse, not a lot to say about this one. Nice card, nice expression again. Le Monde is one of these cards which may not be a Jean Noblet carver, although you probably looked over it again because it's not quite the finesse of the others. We have a bull rather than a horse here, not touching the wreath. It's very close to some medieval and Renaissance imagery of Christ risen, and it could be. I mean, there clearly has, the figure has breasts, but we don't know the sex really. And also, somebody pointed out this crease here. Is this a crease, or is this where Christ on the cross had his side pierced by the lance of, was it Longinus? I can't remember the Roman centurion, to see if he was really dead. That may be a reason for that. You can speculate. Force, not La Force, but Force. We can't see the feet, which you often can in Type 2 decks. Some have speculated this may not be a lion. It could be a bear. I personally think it is a lion, because I think that is clearly a mane. But, you know, you could interpret it as a bear. Bears were prevalent in Europe, whereas lions had long extinct, so that may make sense. But I think we have to remember, if we look at animal paintings and images from medieval times and the Renaissance, often they were really quite poorly represented. Horses have been very well drawn throughout the centuries, but other animals, I mean, some of the pictures of African wildlife by modern standards are very poorly drawn. So it could be just a not very well done lion that could look a bit like a bear, which is my personal theory. This is another one of those which may not be Jean Noblet. And in some ways it is the least well executed card. The wheel is not very round. It's very difficult to draw a wheel at that angle. Very difficult. I know myself as an artist that's not easy to do, and he's kind of made a bit of a mess of that, really. Interesting though that we have the jam on both sides. Often this jam is invisible, or it disappears here. There's just a gap. Now, there could be explanations for this about things not being steady and instability of the wheel and changes in fortune. Or it could be just a mistake. And it also, it's very odd what's going on in the background here. Sometimes there's water. This hasn't got water, but is that water? Why is this much longer than this and a different colour? Is there a reason for that? I think there probably is. I don't think that is a mistake. I think the poorly executed wheel is just lack of flair, really. And the faces are a little bit crude by the standard of the rest of the Noblet deck. But I think these are deliberate choices. Justice. Facing forwards, that's unusual. Staring right at you. And again, the elbow leaning on the scales to tip it slightly. And the hand posture is very odd. It's like she's twisted her arm round. Her left arm. That's a very awkward position. Very awkward. And it could be a deliberate choice. Why her breasts are shown, but it's not see-through, I'm not sure. And these could be wings. They seem to come from the clothes, though. Again, ambiguous. And a large hand. Now, that's another feature of the Noblet deck, is often the hands are unusually large, which I suspect is deliberate. Not much to say about the Emperor, although it does have this ermine pattern here, which you don't see on many others. And he faces what is considered the future. I like that choice as well. L'Impératrice, again, she's looking straight at you. She looks a little bit like Justice. Similar themes, the wings. Again, a very large hand touching the eagle. Le Pape. This blue hair, I think, is a representation of grey hair. I think it's as simple as that, despite what other commentators say. I think it's just that. This card, I really love the face and the hand gestures on this. I don't think these acolytes or cardinals or monks, I'm not sure. Looks like a cardinal's hat. I've never seen them more interesting and better drawn than in any other Tarot de Marseille as this one. I think it's absolutely wonderful. It looks just so real to me. Le Fou. So not Le Mans, Le Fou. V, no U, of course. So again, this is where I could get censored by YouTube. We'll just point out that. You can make up what you think about it. But interesting, rather than a dog, again, you know, some animals were badly drawn. I think he's made a choice that it's a cat. To me, that's a cat-like figure rather than a dog. And this little face carved on his walking pole or staff, I find that very interesting. And the legs and buttocks are flesh-coloured or background colour. Again, a very large hand, out of proportion to the other hand, makes you look at the hand. Temperance, we're missing a T here. It's l'Emperance. Should it be a C or an S? I'm not sure. The main feature of this is a very small head in proportion to the rest of her. She's got a big body. She's a strapping angel, but with a very tiny head. And again, quite expressive. King of Batons. Oh, right. So they're the trump cards. Right, I was going to move on next to... Just put those to one side. So trumps and court cards and pips last. So let's just look at the court cards. I think the court cards are wonderful in this deck. So King of Batons. Some things I've got things to say about, some I haven't. Here we've got what looks like a halo or ray of light. Chris Adar does this in a more obvious way in his deck, and I was a bit like, why? Where does he get this from? But there is historical precedence for him doing this. It's a bit more subtle in these than Chris Adar. If I forget to say anything about these court cards, because I've got a lot to say, I just beg my pardon, because there's too much to say in the short time. So let's have all the kings out, actually. So let's do it by status. So yeah, they're fairly standard compared to other decks. They're all looking in a certain direction. Halo, maybe halo. Bit of a crown. Sometimes he doesn't have a crown on the King of Coins. Notice, again, it's this feature of there's only one side to the chair. Where's the other leg? He kind of floats there. He doesn't have this tomb opening, but he has this pattern here. So that's slightly different. I do like the tomb. I think that's quite interesting. But it comes, one thing that comes across with these court cards in particular is they kind of predate cubism. We've got this idea of we're showing perspective from different angles. It's non-traditional, so we can see kind of the sides a bit and the front. So things are slightly distorted. I mean, Picasso did this in the 20th century. Jean Noblet and others were doing this in the 17th century. Not quite as extreme, obviously, but this idea of being able to distort perspective in a cubist notion, and with blocks of colours that are very bold and almost cubist. I think that's just wonderful. Where are we? Right, so we've got the queens. All looking this way apart from Queen of Batons. This Queen of Coins is just fantastic. You know, the composition here, this line that goes like this to the Queen, and the eye line is, it's masterful. It's really fantastic. And these curves here, all these curves represent the coins, the curve, the coin. And her face is so expressive. An oversized hand again. She looks like she's about to step forward. Often the court cards, they're not quite steady. Very few of them look firmly planted on their chair or throne or ground or horse. There are exceptions. Are these wings, or is it a winged back chair? Large hand again, quite stern looking. She's got this covered cup unlike the rest of the cups. She looks to me like she's indoors. In some decks, this is a window. It's a bit ambiguous here. I think it probably should be a window, actually, rather than the canopy going over and round, which is what I think some have chosen to. I think there could be a window there, and she is inside. The Queen of Batons, I think the, not bare breast, but see-through breast, is to represent her fertility and youth. She's clearly pregnant. She's possibly pregnant. Queens, well, most women at that in the 17th century or a period earlier, because we may be representing going back before these were produced, were often pregnant. That was a woman's lot, is to be frequently pregnant. And thankfully the tarot acknowledges that. It's historically accurate. If they're not pregnant, they have children in their breast. Well, they wouldn't be breastfeeding, they'd probably have a wet nurse, but they would be producing milk, possibly. So, you know, this is a common feature for the women of this time. It also reminds me of something I need to point out, actually. Let's go back to the Pope. I've missed him. There. Now, this varies. He has a triple cross or a crook. And I hadn't realised, somebody pointed out that there was a change in, I think, around the 14th, 15th century. And this is actually older. This is what a pope would have held pre-14th century. Interesting that Noblet's chosen that. Is it because he's basing it on a much older deck that we don't have anymore, older Tarot de Marseille, or is he just harking back to he thinks that's how it should be? Interesting to speculate on that, and it may reinforce the notion that the Noblet deck is based on a very, very old Tarot de Marseille deck. I just wonder. So the Knights, now these are fantastic. These are my favourite Knights, along with the Spanish Tarot by Fournier. And the reason I love these Knights so much, not only are the faces absolutely wonderful, him, this one, you can tell the suit and the character of the suit from their faces, but also majestically. Oh, another thing is, there's always a tall plant just near the foot on the stirrup, not so much on the sword here. There's a feature, he's kind of just stepping over this big plant. The blue horse, I think, is meant to be a grey horse. I think that's a grey. That's why. I don't know what's going on there. Different colours. And is this a shield on the back? I'm not sure. Always outdoor, the black earth, outdoor, quite rough environment. But the great thing about this, and you can study this for ages, is how, it only dawned on me recently, is how the horse's face more closely mirrors the face of the Chevalier than in any other deck I've ever seen. The mood of the rider, the Chevalier, is mirrored very closely to me in the horse's expression and posture. And that is, again, fantastic skill on a small scale, on a small deck, to achieve that in a way that I don't think any other deck has ever managed. It's absolutely wonderful. And finally, the Valets. Again, fantastic faces, two facing this way. All of them appear to be outdoors, but there's no vegetation. I'm not sure how to interpret that. This covered cup, we used that as he's hiding things. He's keeping his feelings hidden and a bit secretive. A more mundane reason could be that he's keeping flies off and dust and keeping the contents pure while he takes it from wherever to whoever. It could be as simple as that. Also, there's different coloured tights, but not here. And the last thing to say about the batons, which dawned on me, is it's subtle, but if you look closely, they do look like young people who are slightly unsure of themselves. There's a slight awkwardness in each of them in their pose. I would say the Valet de Coupe looks slightly hesitant, walking slowly. That's the feeling you get from this. The Valet d'Espée holds his sword in a strange way. So again, he's not quite confident. It's a bit of bravado. He's almost learning to be, and next up will be a knight. The Valet de Denier has this strange posture with his legs and his feet pointing either. He's not, again, not quite sure of himself. I'm holding this, but he's looking down. And the Valet de Baston, he looks quite rugged. He's got this strange shape. Again, it's this cubist idea that you've got in both side and back profile, and this strange shape with the hands. And he's a bit rough. He's like, he may appear to be quite confident and mature, but isn't really, because it's all a bit new to him. And it's, again, he's putting on a bit of a show of bravado. That's my interpretation. And I think the Noblet deck really triggers that feeling, unlike any other again. So you can see I'm really quite taken. Now, I'll go through the pips a bit quicker because of time pressure. They're less well, in the case of Fleur Noir, there's less emphasis on the minor cards, and in traditional divination in France, there's been less emphasis on these. So maybe a little less gone into the thought and design. So nice and clear though. Nice restoration. Sorry, this red dot here. So that's our batons. Denier. Here's the name, Jean Noblet. Au Faubourg, I think we should say that, in Saint-Germain, in what is almost the centre of Paris today. Would have been on the outskirts in his day, almost semi-rural part of Paris. Was gradually becoming wealthier, and people were building bigger and bigger houses in that area, and his workshop would have, maybe he was forced out because rents got higher, and maybe he couldn't keep up the costs, I don't know. But yeah, it was a burgeoning part of Paris and Saint-Germain area. This 10 of coins, I think it's a really good card actually, because what he's done here is he's made the coins smaller to give more white space, well, écru space, and just give it a bit of breathing space. It makes it a more relaxed looking, more harmonious card. The spacing is lovely on that one. That's again part of the genius of a master craftsman. Oh, and we've got these crosses inside, which look a bit like Templar, Knights Templar crosses. I don't know if that is the case. Again, that can lead to very wild speculation. Once anybody mentions Knights Templar, people go a bit crazy, but we'll just leave it at that. They're crosses anyway. Nice sword. Ace of sword, the hand the other way around, so you've got the fist that way rather than that way. I think the swords, there was a few missing in the original deck, and he's had to restore those based on others. I think it's in the swords 6 to 10, possibly. Mine are out of order because they have been shuffled, but I can just put them into their suits for this video. Jean Noblet again. Au Faubourg Saint-Germain. I think that's how you pronounce it. Apologies for the French pronunciation once again, but that's an approximation for me. And the large cup in the coupe there. So there we go. That's the Jean Noblet deck. So yeah, nice small deck. Oh, another thing to point out, it does have square corners, which is okay because it's not a big deck. It fits in the hand quite nice and it shuffles well. That's the backs, very traditional backs. And it's a nice paper quality. They slide very nicely. Oh, I've got it upside down. So yeah, it has won me over actually. I think it's in my top 3 or 4 decks, I would say. I think it is wonderful. I like decks for different kinds of reading and different things, but yeah, it's partly why I've saved this one for now, because there's a lot to say, and I wanted to do it justice and not just rush over it and just say, here's a nice deck, quick look at all the cards. It deserves a bit more than that. Once again, wonderful faces and a lot to look into with this deck. It's very kind of triggering. It's very pure. I think the words I'd use is it's very pure, it's very expressive, it's holistic, it works as a whole. It's not like bits that don't quite connect. It really does. And I think for that reason it's a very fulfilling and a very rewarding deck. I'd highly recommend it. Right, I better go stop now and